Hello, everyone. Welcome to Elevating Your Life. Paula Vail here. I am just happy to be joining you once again and sharing another fantastic guest. Today we have with us Phill Webster. He is a writer, actor, and spiritual teacher. After living abroad for 20 years, he returned to the UK and ventured into acting. He has since gone on to appear in movies alongside Sylvester Stallone and many others. After losing his mother in 2021, he realized that he had been dismissing spiritual calls to action his entire life. And he did several things, such as he trained with Indigenous Shamans from North and South America, as well as world-renowned mediums. He has studied female spirituality in the Middle Ages at the University of Barcelona and is a trained meditation teacher as well as a personal trainer. His first book, Letting Glow, it's absolutely fantastic. And it's a profoundly personal account of grief through learning to connect with intuition. And he invites readers to join him in exploring their connection with higher consciousness. Oh, how fantastic is that? First off, welcome, Phill.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Oh, so happy to have you on the show. Well, I would love it if you'd like to share a little more of your background and kind of, tell us about what you've done, a bit of your training, and then what prompted you to write this great book?
Sure. Thank you. Yeah. Where do I start? So I grew up on a place called the Isle of Wight, which is a small rural island in the south of England. And around my mid-20s, I was kind of desperate to get out of there. So I went traveling around the world, and I ended up in Helsinki, in Finland, of all places. I spent some time in Miami for a long time and things like that. But yeah, Helsinki, Finland, that wasn't really my plan, but I ended up staying there for 20 years. Which was just through me getting comfortable, making friends, relationships, stuff like that. And it was a good base to travel to other places from. So yeah, I did that, and then hit my 40s, and I thought it was probably time to come home. So I came back to the UK, and after doing a host of various jobs where I never really found that thing that I wanted to do. I never thought, okay, I want to be a fireman or a fighter pilot or something like that. And I came back to the UK, and I thought, well, what would I really like to do if I was truly honest with myself? And I've always been interested in movies. So I went to drama school in my 40s and very quickly started getting a few small parts and a line here or there. So when I say acting, I use it very loosely, but I paid the bills with it. So that was kind of my sort of measure of success with that. And it was, it worked for a while. And then, of course, 2020 came along, and that sort of, through what happened there, sort of sent me in a very different direction.
Wow. Well, what triggered you to now become an author? What prompted you to write your book?
Well, it was essentially something that happened around my mum passing. So we all went through the pandemic. Obviously don't need to tell anyone too much about that anymore. We've heard enough about that. And my mum was essentially self-isolating on the Isle of Wight, where I told you that I grew up. She'd lived there for the last 20 years, pretty much alone. And I was trying to do the right thing. I'm based in London, so I would go there when restrictions were lifted and things like that. But we were going through a lot of lockdowns, so I thought I was doing the right thing by keeping away. And then we got to the end of 2020. I didn't see her at Christmas, unfortunately, because there was some sort of new variant or something like that. And I hadn't seen her for about 6 weeks, but we would FaceTime every day. So really where the book came from was something that happened right before she passed. And I didn't think she was going to pass. She was 76 years old. She was in reasonably good health. She had a few age-related health problems like high blood pressure and things like that. But she would always bounce back from any sort of downtime. So we FaceTime on this particular day, and it was probably the third time or something like that. And it was relatively late at night, like 9:30, 10 or something like that. And when she answered the call, she picked the phone up, and there was a man standing beside her. which kind of took me back. There was not supposed to be anyone there. We were in a lockdown. She lived in a very quiet place. I knew all of the neighbors, stuff like that. And I was kind of shocked to see this guy. And I saw him long enough that I could describe him. He looks like he was in his mid-60s, thinning gray hair, glasses, and kind of a gaunt face. And as she moved the phone, he went out of shot. And I said, well, who's that? And she replied, who's what? And I said, well, okay, I just saw somebody. And she said, well, no, there's no one here. And she started telling me about her day. And this kind of just threw me off. While she was talking, I was thinking, well, I just saw the guy, all right? And my mind was going all over the place. And I was kind of instantly annoyed because I was keeping away, trying to keep her safe through COVID and all that stuff. And I was thinking, well, who's this guy? But I said, sorry to interrupt, Mom. I said, but are you telling me that you're completely alone? And she said, yeah, there's been no one here since, I think somebody had been to visit her at lunchtime. And then we just had a conversation, and I just thought, well, I must have been mistaken, and I just dismissed it. We spoke for another 30, 40 minutes or something like that. And I thought, well, I was mistaken. So I went to bed that night. The next morning, I got a phone call from one of the neighbors that they couldn't get in the house. And yeah, my mum had a heart attack and she'd passed away that morning. So the thing from the night before just took on a whole different spin for me. I've always sort of been somewhat on the fence with my sort of spiritual beliefs and things like that. But this obviously sort of gave everything a new dimension. And obviously through all the grief and the shock of everything, this was kind of playing at the back of my mind. Well, what was that? Was that somebody letting me know? Seemed to be the most logical explanation. Mm-hmm. So that's essentially what triggered me sort of going down this very spiritual route, and essentially where the book came from.
Yeah. That opened a whole new window for you, didn't it?
Yeah, completely. I'd always sort of taken an interest in maybe sort of esoteric things when I was a lot younger, I think, as we do when we're teenagers or something like that. But as I grew older, through my 30s, I kind of got quite cynical and sort of put it all away. I thought, well, that doesn't really help me day to day, any of these kind of things. So I didn't really take that much of an interest in it. But yeah, that event some months later, so I was working on a film immediately after my mum passed, and I kind of didn't speak to anybody on the film set for the first 2 months or something like that. And eventually I told somebody this story, and she said, well, have you asked for a sign? And I thought, well, no, I never thought of that. So one day I did ask for a sign, and then they started coming like thick and fast. And yeah, that just kind of took me down this whole route looking into mediumship. And yeah, that was it really. Everything's been different ever since.
Oh, wow. What a window that opens. And you even, went and trained with amazing shamans. Tell us a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, so where do I start with that? So initially I just to get to that, I read a book or listened to a book on mediumship by a medium called Claire Broad in the UK. And that really sort of opened the door to me thinking about sort of connecting with higher realms or our intuition or whatever however you would look at it. So I started attending a development circle of mediumship after speaking with a few mediums and getting confirmation that my mum was around and other things. I was just had these amazing experiences that undoubtedly told me that my mum's still around, all right, and she's aware of my life, and as well as other things, and then seeing mediums in action with other people as well, just getting confirmations and tell people these amazing, comforting things that just seemed undeniable. So that really opened the door to that, and again, the book documents my journey through that. So yeah, training as a medium just sort of led me down a bit of a different path. There were some other things that happened actually prior to my mum. Sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit. And actually one thing in particular, I'm sorry, I'm jumping too much all over the place here. Made me really it made me really look sort of into more indigenous teachings. I just started recognizing a very strong similarity between mediumship itself and then looking back on on ancient teachings of especially shamans from your side of the world. And there were so many similarities in connecting with the spirit world that it seemed like a natural progression to take. So I did get in touch with a couple of teachers, and I trained. Well, I say trained with a man called Puma Singona. So he's I hope I pronounced his name properly. So he's from the Andes, and then somebody else called Manari Ushigua, excuse me, from the Sapara Nation in the Ecuadorian Amazon. So I've been in touch with those quite a lot, and I've actually wrote another book sort of documenting those experiences, which sort of carries on from the first book. But yeah, it's I feel like I'm very much at the start of my journey. I've definitely learned a lot, but yeah, I'm developing as a medium, and I'm learning all the time.
And isn't it amazing when we open that window and we look at that? Myself, I spent time with an amazing shaman in Peru years ago.
Yeah.
And it was just so fantastic. And it really does open a door to realizing, that there's spirit guides, there's angels, there's so much around us and with us. Animals, animal messages. I mean, there's so much. If we open that window and we look for that, we can see so much. What was it like for you to first communicate with spirit guides and come to that realization?
Well, yeah, that's again been quite a journey. So just to go back a few more years, I had one instance where, and this was completely out of the blue. I was just moved back to the UK, and I was still had my foot in the door with Helsinki in Finland. So I was flying there for work pretty much every weekend, where I was working as a personal trainer. I had a few clients there and stuff like that, that kind of eased me into moving back to the UK. And one morning I woke up, and this was just completely out of the blue. And a few years prior to my mum passing again, and I just came out of sleep, and I was kind of in, I think they call it the theta state, where the brain's kind of half awake and half asleep, and it's the state that you go into when you go into deep meditation, but we tend to go into it when we're falling asleep and when we're coming out of sleep. So as I was waking up, and I didn't know what was going on, and this was how I would have described it at the time, before knowing anything about spirit guides or something like that. And this sounds kind of nuts, but I felt like there was a rainbow stream of consciousness going straight into the top of my head, right? And it felt like I was being downloaded with some sort of information that was overwhelming and profound, and something was asking me, and I knew whatever this was that was asking me was way smarter than me. It was saying, do you still want this? And I didn't know what was going on, and just woke up, and I was like, okay, what is this? And just kind of snapped myself awake, and whatever it was just stopped. And the strangest thing is when I looked around me in the room, and there was a glowing holographic grid, okay, all around me. This is the first time I've had experienced anything like that. And I know how it sounds. Okay, so I was like, okay, well, this is weird. This is interesting. And I just watched it, and it faded out. And the first thing I did, I called my fiance. She was visiting family at the time, and she said, well, you were dreaming. And I was like, well, it wasn't a dream. This wasn't a dream. This was, I was conscious of what was going on. And she was sort of dismissed it. And then I was like, okay, so I called another friend, and he said, well, maybe you slept on your arm weird and you kind of were seeing traces. And I was like, it wasn't anything like that. This was something profound. And I ended up Googling it. And apparently it's quite common. So I came across a few sort of stories about this, and that led me towards learning about shamanism. And apparently it was very common to sort of describe or see a grid when connecting with spirit guides. And I didn't know anything about spirit guides at the time. I didn't know anything about the crown chakra, and that's where we communicate with spirit guides. And later on, when I spoke to a medium, the same lady whose book that I initially listened to, she said, well, yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. That's your guides connecting with you through the crown chakra. And I've heard so many stories again where people have used this term, being downloaded with information. So I feel like these instances would come up and I would dismiss them. And there were other things that had happened like all throughout my life that I didn't really know what to do with. And I sort of just ignored them until this event around my mum passing. And then I thought, okay, well, maybe there's something to all this, and I should look into it.
Oh, I love it. I love it. That's so exciting. And you have mentioned that we can separate our consciousness from our thoughts. Tell us a little bit about that. What does that mean?
Absolutely. So in learning about mediumship and meditation very much came into play. And meditation was something that I looked at some years ago when I trained as a personal trainer, but it was from a very different approach. It was more about connecting with your physicality and sort of setting the mindset to work out, essentially. So looking at meditation through mediumship, I definitely come at it from a different way. So I believe that when you start I'm not claiming that I'm sort of knowing all the answers. It's very much a learning process. But when you start being able to step back from your thoughts and recognize that we're not our thoughts, that we're something that is observing our thoughts, then I really believe that you can take that sort of back seat, connect with your ultimate consciousness, which I believe we are, and just watch those thoughts go on by, without attaching any emotion to them or running with them. And it takes time to do that. And then at least through mediumship and connecting with spirit guides, I think that then through my own experiences at least, then you can tell when something else comes in that's not your thoughts, that the thoughts are going on over here. And then when something new comes in, when you're trying to give messages to somebody that you might be sitting with, then you can tell the difference. You can tell the difference between the new voice and your own voice. So yeah, I think it's very possible to be able to separate consciousness from the thoughts.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And that is such a powerful statement because it's true. Our thoughts, we create our thoughts. Those thoughts create the emotions, and we can separate that and,
Yeah.
direct it. And I mean, it really is amazing what we're able to do with our mind and how we direct our thoughts, wouldn't you say?
I mean, it's such an ongoing process. I mean, we're getting bombarded with them night and day, right? And it's not like I'm talking like this, but I'm not walking around like Yoda and sort of just like this way. I'm constantly sort of dealing with it as we all are, and we all have intrusive thoughts, and it's our human condition, right? You see somebody in a red t-shirt, and that reminds you of something else from then, who reminds you of them, and you go off on this tangent, and it's impossible not to, and it's happening all the time. But it's very beneficial to be able to step back and sort of see the space between the thoughts, I think,
Yes.
and sort of not get swept up in it, and everything comes from a thought, right? Like no matter what it is, everything starts with a thought.
Oh,
So yeah,
so true. And in your book, Letting Glow, you share lots of meditations. Tell us what makes meditation such a great tool for us. What would you like to share about that?
For myself personally, I would have over the years occasional bouts of anxiety, things like that. As soon as I started meditating, just they completely stopped. And I mean, I still do. It's difficult to sort of set time out of your day to put at least 5 minutes aside, or even longer if you can, to sit and meditate. For example, today I've been meaning to do it all day, and just one thing after another came up, and I still haven't got around to doing it. But I think that definitely personally I can see the benefits from taking that moment to just sit with yourself and just silence all distractions and just have that moment of quiet, even if it's only 5 minutes. I think it's really beneficial. Yeah. And I just think it's just so helpful with mental health and just connecting with yourself. Obviously I'm moving towards mediumship, so there's a benefit to it there completely as well.
Yeah, it is. I've always felt meditations are really, they're like a self-love,
Yeah,
give yourself some love,
absolutely.
some relaxation, good breath.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I just, one of the meditations in the book seem to be the thing that people really have been giving me a lot of good feedback on, which is interesting. I wasn't sure that that I was going to get that kind of response. So yeah, it's nice to hear.
Yes. Tell us a little bit about just what it was like to be an actor and to do a little bit of that? I'm curious. I
Oh,
think that was so
sure.
fun.
Yeah, I've had some great experiences. So yeah, like I was saying, I wasn't under any illusions about setting Hollywood on fire in my mid 40s, just showing up at acting school and then getting a few parts. I was kind of being very realistic with my place in that world. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It's not something that I'm really concentrating on at the moment. The book has really taken all of my attention.
Mhm.
Plus, as you can imagine, there are a lot of egos on film sets and stuff like that. So that's kind of not really where I'm the direction I want to go.
Yeah, yeah.
But that being said, I've met some wonderful people and I've made friends for life. Yeah,
Mhm.
some highlights, just to drop a few names would be working on films. I can't really say working on films with Tom Hardy and Sylvester Stallone was a highlight for me. I worked on a TV show called The Great with Elle Fanning for a good 9 months. Yeah, I've had some really amazing experiences. Stallone was, for me, growing up in the 80s, that was a high point for me. Essentially, I was hired to stare at him. Okay, so I think it's
Fun.
Expendables 4, which comes out
Oh,
in a couple of months, I think. He got off his Harley and I was biker number 3 or something like that, and I just had to stare at him like I was going to beat him up, which is ridiculous, obviously, because it's Stallone, and he stared back, and we did that for a whole week, just stared at each other. So yeah, that's my Stallone story.
how fun. How fun. I love that. I love that. And I understand, Phill, that you are going to be publishing another book. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I just felt that letting go really felt like well, it was an outpouring of grief for me. It definitely helped with the grieving process. It took me the better part of a year, and it just gave me time to just really just pour it all out, right? For anyone that's lost someone, that you know how that is. It's so difficult that first year, particularly, and for me, the first 2 years were extremely hard, and now it's at the 2.5 year mark. So I feel like I've sort of got over some sort of hurdle at least. But yeah, that first book was just more an outpouring of grief. It was a lot about my own life, but I learned so much through exploring these spiritual avenues and about mediumship that I felt like I got another book in me straight away. So I just started pouring it into another book, which is kind of less about me and more about the sort of spirituality as a whole. And I'll even go so far as to say that I believe that I some of it's channeled. It didn't come from me. I look back at it later and I was like, okay, I didn't write that. That's too smart for me. So it's really about, I believe, the sort of bigger picture. Yeah, and that's going to be out next year.
What uh, what would you tell the audience who is sitting here thinking, I really want to, up my awareness of intuition and open up to things? What advice would you give for like
Well, I
step
really,
one?
yeah, I really like that question, because one thing I always say is that we have all these terms for things like we can't quite put our finger on something, or we have a gut feeling, or you can walk into the room and cut the air with a knife, and we have all these expressions. But as soon as you start talking about clairvoyance or clairaudience or anything like that, then people tend to look at you like you're nuts. So, but I think it's just purely a question of semantics. We're talking about the same thing. We're talking about sitting back and connecting with our higher intuition and tapping into that immediate feeling before the thoughts come in. So I think that's really the way to go to connect with your intuition, is to just go with that first thing that comes before you start questioning everything, and before the habitual thoughts come in. Just go with your gut instinct, and then yeah, take the time to meditate. I think those are really the first steps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So be open to that first instinct and what you feel
Yeah.
and realize it's real. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not flawless, but I think when you begin to sort of be more aware of this process and open up to those things, you tend to get sharper with it, I believe. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I love that. How exciting. How fantastic. With a few minutes left in the show, Phill, what last message do you want to leave with everyone today?
I think that's it. Just to follow on from that we all have this intuition. I was very I wouldn't say very skeptical, but I was definitely on the fence in terms of the spirit world and spirit guides and things like that. Now I'm 100% stand by everything that I've wrote in the book. I've learned so much. It's such a subjective experience, so you can't really, all you can tell is your own personal story, right? And if it resonates with somebody else, then great. But obviously we can't sort of force our beliefs onto other people. But yeah, I think just the first step is just taking that time to just connect with your intuition and stepping back from your thoughts, and then see where it takes you. Yeah.
Yes. And really every new day for us is an opening, isn't it? In the direction we take our thoughts and, you know, what we decide to learn and observe. And that really is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'd never thought that I would end up on this path. And as much as I would rather my mom was still here, I miss her every day. I wouldn't have done any of this. So it was almost like a parting gift from her. That's kind of the way that I look at it. Right? I wouldn't have done this if my mom wasn't here. If my mom was still here, forgive me. But yeah, it's opened up a whole new way of looking at things for me.
Well, I just want to thank you for your beautiful information and wisdom and your beautiful book, and all of the great inspiring things that you've put out there. And I'm really believe in the ripple effect. Every little thing in there that you talk about, one thing can trigger one person and make a difference.
I hope so.
One the other, and together we can just be a positive energy in the world. And I really appreciate you, Phill, and love your book, and really thank you for sharing this with everyone.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. It was really nice speaking with you.
Oh, you're so welcome. And everyone out there, thank you for joining us today. Love, hugs, and blessings. Chat with you soon. Phill, love, hugs, and blessings, and have a great day, everybody.